to be here. For those that don't know me, my name's Mark. I'm the pastor of Lifehouse Community Church. Lead the church together with my wife Katherine. And this morning we are picking up on our series of Jesus' vision. And specifically we're looking at the vision that we believe God is giving to us as a church. The way forward for Lifehouse Community Church. In the Bible, we see vision all the time. We see it right at the start. God has a vision. He creates the heavens and the earth. He creates the stars and the land and the water and the animals and the giraffe with its long neck and loads of other creatures that I find fascinating. Even though I'm not the world's biggest animal fan. Some of you will know. But he has vision from the start. Even when Adam and Eve sin, he still has a vision. The vision stays the same. He still wants to be in relationship with his people, with the people he has created. We see stories like Abraham, where he says to Abraham, I'll make you numerous as the stars. That's vision. That's pretty big, isn't it? Numerous as the stars. You ever tried to count the stars? Just me. Good luck with it. It's not going to happen, isn't it? Or counting the grains of the sand. It's impossible. That's vision. He sends us Jesus. He has a plan. He has a vision. Jesus dies, but it doesn't end there. He rises again. There is vision. God has a vision. There are plenty of characters that we can see in the Bible as well that God gives vision to. We believe that this is God's vision that we're about to share with you. That this is God's vision in which we're partnering with Him. As many of you will know, we currently have an Interim Forum. Came out of our big conversation, a group of people that we believe God's put together for a season. And in that, we have been praying and seeking God as to what He's saying for us as a church going forward. And we believe this is what God has given us. There's a quote from a book, and it says this. It says, vision equals inspiration, conviction, action, determination, and completion. There's multiple layers of vision. There's inspiration. There's the conviction of it's going to make a difference. It's going to change something. There's action. Vision is great. You can sit on a piece of paper, but if you don't do anything with it, it doesn't happen. Determination. When the going gets tough, that you still have that same vision. When the obstacles come in place, when it looks like it's not going to happen, there's a determination to keep on going. And eventually that you see that vision completed. There's one thing about having an idea. I have loads of ideas. There's another thing about dreaming. But there's something about vision. Vision is another step. It sets a course of where we're going and a belief and a faith to rise up amongst us. It's not just something that sounds good or could happen, but an expectancy that it will happen. And I'm just going to briefly look at 4 things, very briefly. And then what we're going to do is different ones of us are going to unpack, different ones from the forum are going to unpack the words of the vision. So 4 things. So, vision provides passion, motivation, direction, and purpose. It gives us a passion. Vision evokes emotion. We need to be passionate about the vision. It's more than ideas and dreams. I had a vision on Friday night. I was watching Middlesbrough v Man United. I had a vision that we might win. I had a vision that we might get to the FA Cup final. And excitement and passion began to rise. There was a few bits where it dropped, where we went 1-0 down. We then went 1-1, and then we went to penalties. And passion started to rise, especially when I'm watching it with other Man United fans. And I'm a Middlesbrough supporter, if you didn't know. And we get to win. Vision provides us with passion. It gives us motivation. It gives us a reason to do something. It gives us a reason to get up on a morning as such. Vision is part of the reason why, motivation is part of the reason why you complete things. It gives us a direction. Vision provides us with a roadmap. What we're about to share should hopefully show us where we're going. Should give us markers in the sand. Should give us points of reference to go, is this in our vision? Is this what God's calling us to do? Lastly, it gives us purpose. Each and every one of us sat here matter to God. Each and every one of us has a part to play in this vision. This isn't my vision. This isn't the Interim Forum's vision. This is God's vision that He gives to us as His people, as His body. And we read, don't we, in the Bible that the church is described as a body made up of many parts. Vision needs each of us to play our part in it, to accomplish what God is asking us. Today, we're just going to go through the strapline of our vision. You will see that this vision is big. It's far-reaching than we can share just in one morning. We are going to unpack it over weeks and months to come as part of our series of looking at Jesus' vision. We're also going to take a family meeting on the 23rd of February. Details will be in the newsletter, in which we'll share more about what God is saying. This is the strapline. It's designed to reach not just us in the church, but those not yet in the church. It should be open and bring a hope to all of us. Do you want to know what it is?
Yeah.
See if this works. There we go. So our vision that we believe God has given us is Lifehouse Community Church bringing hope to the Cherwell Valley. That might just sound like a few words. Could sound like a cool sentence. But actually there's much more to it as we unpack it. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what the vision is. Each word has a meaning. It then has a strategy that goes with it, that of how we're going to outwork it. And I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to do the first word.
Thanks, Mark. So God's not just been speaking to us on the floor, actually God's been speaking to the whole church over many years. Lifehouse Community Church in the form of Vista was planted in 1992, so it's coming up to its 30th birthday. We're going to have a party, I hope. Yes, definitely have a party. And there's a prophetic log that's been kept over the years for the church, which I've actually had a chance to look through and review. And one of the things which has consistently stood out to me as I've done that is how God speaks about life over and over again. Back in 2003, Rich Colebrook said this: God is taking us to you from being a canal to being a river, from something well ordered but a bit stagnant, a canal, to something teeming with life, even if it's lacking order. You're saying, don't be afraid of a bit of a mess or something that seems to meander a bit on the journey. The important thing is the life of God. That's there. That's more important than everything being well organised. In 2020, Tom England had this word: God is opening doors for us, which will enable us to see the life, get out of the house, to the communities we serve. And God is opening doors. When I first started getting involved in Lifehouse, I remember one of the prayer points was, where do boundary meet? You know, we'd got like the option of meeting here for a Christmas service, but it wasn't really clear that this was going to be a regular venue in boundary. And God has opened that door. God is opening doors for us so that the life can flow out. In the big conversation, there was a sense that there was a quality of life that God wanted to have within us that was expectant and missional and multi-generational. Expectant because we believe in a God who is good and who cannot be thwarted and who acts. Missional because Jesus came to seek and to save the lost, and he wants us to be a part of that. And multi-generational because church isn't church unless it's everyone's church. Right up to date, we had a learning community back in November, which some of us were at, and John Sanson, who's recognised in Oxford as one of their clear prophets, said he referred to the picture of the sailboat. This is not. I've gone too far. This is a picture of me and my two boys sailing, by the way. Nothing prophetic in that, just what I'd like to see it. Yeah, remember the picture of Mark's sailboat, where Lifehouse is the sail and Oxford is the boat, and it's important that we're all connected. And John said, don't think that the sail is insignificant compared to the boat. It's the sail that catches the wind. And God is going to blow by his Spirit, and we will do things because God is blowing, not because of our size. God's not interested in whether we're as big as Oxford or not. God's interested that we get our sail up, that he can blow. We're called Lifehouse because God has said that's something to us about life. God has called us to be filled with life, knowing him, having his streams of living water bubbling up in us and overflowing to others. And God has called us to share life, seeing God at work in the big things and the small things. I loved it when we started the meeting with just stories of God's goodness. Life inside the church and outside the church, not having some kind of divide between our spiritual bits of life and the rest of our life, but an authentic Christian life, which is 24/7 and is who we are all the time and not just when we're together in meetings. Life overflowing and flowing out. And this is a good point for me to hand over to Kat.
Right, I'm going to do community. How do I take this on? Like, give me technology. Like, already about what community is, but we're all designed to be in community. That's how God designed us. We do like to sometimes be on our own, but actually God designed us to function well in community. It's about being in each other's lives, about being a family that share life together, and just being in and out of each other's houses in the ups and downs. But it's also about, I think, community. I think we need to remember is because actually genuinely everyone here probably really wants to be known. I think that there's something about feeling alone if nobody knows who you are, but true community is about being known, and that's what we want to be as a church. We want each of you and everyone to be known for who they are individually. We see so many times in the Bible, there's countless, Jesus works in community. He's eating with people, talking with people, spending time with people. Sometimes these are big groups, and other times it's just with the ones and twos. He also knows when to spend time on his own so that he can do community well and takes his time away, but it's about getting that balance and about doing community. I think we also need to remember it's not about being perfect. Community is not just about, when I've sorted my life out, my house is perfect, I'll invite someone around for dinner. It's, just come in, I've only got a piece of toast to give you or a cup of tea, but my house is a bit of a mess, but actually being part of my life and where I am, and it's about being there for each other. And that's what we want to see, isn't it? We want to not wait for that perfect moment, but actually we're just there for each other and being family. If you often turn up at my house, it often involves a few kids screaming at some point and having an argument, but you know what? It's not about me waiting until my family are all perfect and having a good day. It's about joining in and playing board games. Coming and watching Strictly, like I know some of you did, and even if it meant you couldn't actually watch the programme, there was so much noise, but it was about spending life and being with one another. I just think it's about being authentic and just being with one another when we can. I think also that as a church we just see this quite also being valued by discipleship and pastoring. This isn't about kind of like going to a doctor's when we have a problem. This is about more like a kind of a coach or a personal trainer. Actually, it's about being with people in all that they need to do. It might be just walking alongside someone when they just need someone there. Sometimes it's that calling encouragement for people to keep going, and sometimes it's noticing where they need to improve and going, come on, we can do this, and training them up. And I think as a church it's about getting that balance and being there in everything, but mostly about us all just being known and wanting to know each other.
When Mark asked me to speak for 3 minutes on a word from the strapline, I was really hoping I was going to get the. I've got 3 minutes on church, so we'll see. So in the Bible is where the church starts. We see Jesus calling a ragtag group of people to follow him, and their lives are transformed through encounter with Jesus. We see this gallery of rogues, of fishermen, of like dodgy tax collectors. They become the New Testament church. They become a powerful melting pot of cultures and classes united in their worship of Jesus Christ. We see that, as Katherine said, church isn't done on our own as individuals, but as community. As Lifehouse Community Church, we want to put Jesus at the centre of everything we do, at the centre of our communities, of all of our lives, at the centre of every interaction. We seek first and foremost to glorify him, sustaining our relationship with him through prayer and through worship. We desire to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind and strength. And as we grow in our love for him, to bless and love those around us as well. So what does that look like practically? We want, as Lifehouse Community Church, to foster a rhythm of prayer, of listening to God and inviting him to speak into everything we do. The Apostle Paul encourages the church to pray continually, What does that look like? A starting point is that in our personal prayer time, in our homes, in our community meetings, leadership meetings, and on Sundays, we give God the space he deserves. We listen to his voice and we glorify and worship him, giving thanks for what he has done. It was great to share testimony at the start of this meeting and just give glory to God for what he has done over the last few years. Already I've been so encouraged in the Interim Forum meetings by the time that's given to prayer. It's not just a sort of business meeting, but it is time to spend intentionally seeking God's will for this church. Be encouraged that your leaders are seeking to cultivate their personal relationships with God, to go deeper with him, and to listen to his plans for us as church. But we want to do even better. Lord, would you teach us to pray? Would you teach us to worship God well together? We want to pursue excellence and participation in our worship. We are a ministry of all believers, and that means that each of us can bring something from God in our worship, something that will build up and encourage the church. I believe that every one of us comes with something to share. Our worship might not always look like singing together. We want to create a culture of worship that isn't limited to gathering together on a Sunday, but we want to worship God and glorify him even when nobody is watching. As we encounter God together, we are transformed. As we worship him, as we put him first in our lives, we become more of what he wants us to be as his church.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about hope. So we are hope carriers. We want people to see God's hope in us. It's important that people don't see us as being grumpy or miserable or angry all the time. Now, I'm not saying we need to be fake, and I'm not saying we need to be perfect, because we can't be that. But we need to be aware that we are God's representatives, that people do need to see something different in us. People need to see the hope that we have, and they need to know that it comes from Jesus. We know that hope changes lives, and it's God's intention that we all live in his hope. In Jeremiah 29, you'll all recall the verse that says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." So how can we be hope bringers? What does it mean? So first of all, we need to spend time in God's presence. If we do that, then his hope will just spill out of us. We need to read more of his word. We need to worship more. We also need to spend time with other believers, to share testimonies like we've done this morning, to testify to God's hope in our own lives. But really importantly, we need to spend time with those who don't yet know Jesus. It's really easy to become cocooned, maybe in the church or in our Christian lifestyle, but it's so important that we get to spend time with non-Christians. We need them to know that our hope comes from Jesus. They will see something different in us. And even though that's challenging, that's what we need to do. We need to pray for boldness so we can show people something different. There are so many hopeless people around. People who can't see any hope in their own future. There are people living without hope everywhere, not just in big cities, not just in areas of huge deprivation, but actually here in Banbury, on Longford Park, in Bicester, on Kingsmere. Many of you will know that I teach at the primary school on Kingsmere in Bicester, and I have the enormous privilege of meeting many people and getting to know the families in our school family. And I know that there are people currently who are struggling with bereavement, divorce, separation, addiction, people facing huge parenting challenges, people trapped in a cycle of abuse, people dealing with illness, poverty, people living in fear and without any hope. Our world is broken, but with God working through us, we need to metaphorically sprinkle them with hope. In fact, we probably need to pour hope on them. It is a challenge, but really that is our obligation. We have to do that. Some years ago, I found myself in a hopeless place. I was dealing with bereavement and then divorce. I had a relationship with God at that time, and I can't imagine what it would have been like had I not had a relationship with God. Everything in my world felt hopeless, and I couldn't see a way forward. I couldn't see a way out of the darkness. But you know what? The church and my Christian friends, they held me up. They showed me God's hope when I couldn't see it. Practically, they supported me. They cleaned my house. They babysat. They invited me to eat with them. Emotionally, they supported me. They listened to me and were there for me literally 24 hours a day. Spiritually, they supported me by praying with me, for me, over me. I found out much later that some people had even prayed around my house when I'd still been sleeping inside. I am so grateful even now to those wonderful people because they helped me see that God did have a future for me, even when I couldn't see it myself. So collectively, we as the church need to bring God's hope to the Chilwell Valley. But today, I want you to consider how you can be a hope bringer whilst living in a hopeless world. It's going to be messy, it's going to be challenging, and there will be a personal cost. But what a privilege to be able to share God's hope in our local communities. Let's make a difference to people's lives.
Amen.
So last harvest outline was being out of Chilwell Valley. There's a bit in the beginning of John's chapter where Philip finds Nathanael and tries to tell him about Jesus. And Nathanael isn't sure, and Philip says, "Come and see." We want to be able to invite people into the life of Jesus. We want to be able to say to people, "Come and see," which means it's the local church, right down to us in twos and threes and individually, which is on the ground, who can do that and can make a difference as someone light. So church needs to be local enough for it to be invitational, for people to be able to come and see. And church also needs to be simple. It needs to be simple enough that there's enough energy to be outwardly focused. If all of our energy is consumed by just keeping the wheels turning on what we've already got, then there'll be no energy left to be outwardly focused and to be able to grow. So church needs to be simple and it needs to be local. But then on the other hand, we like to do this kind of thing, right? We like to have Sunday meetings because they're really important to get together. It's really foundational for new Christians to hear good teaching, and we want to have great worship, and then we want families to come, which means we need kids work and youth work, and that all requires people power. And so there's also a need to be big enough to be able to do that. And church needs to be growable. It needs to be able to expand. We want to be able to reach the whole of the Chilwell Valley. And so we want church to be local and simple and big and growable. And it's hard to do all of those things at the same time because some of them are working against each other. And you'll be glad to hear that we have an answer. We have a strategy of how to do all of these things. And it's actually to carry on doing the things we're doing. Our communities are church in the local. They're church in the simple. Just getting around in people's houses, simple up, in, out rhythm. Eating together, being community, having people join us. That's church in the local. And then we do things a little bit bigger in our locations. Communities gathering together to do together on a Sunday. That's hard for any one community to do alone. And I know in Banbury you've only got one community, and we believe there are more communities to come in Banbury. I really do believe that. And then we want it to be growable. We can create other communities really easily. Chris and Steph just created a community quite. It wasn't hard, was it? You just said, kind of, right, we're going to have another community. If you want to come to ours, and come to ours, and you want to come to our pub quiz, come to our pub quiz, and bam, that was a new community. You know, it's quite easy to scale this thing out. And then as we get more communities, you can imagine how some of those communities could be close enough to say, do you know what, we can make our own location now. Obviously, we'll talk to Mark about it, don't just do it. But you can see how these communities can grow and expand and form new locations. And that's how we're going to reach the whole of the Char Valley. God has called us to be a church that is filled with his life and filled with his hope. He carries that life and carries that hope, the good news of Jesus, flowing into more and more of the Char Valley. And I'm going to hand back over to Mark.
So Lifehouse Community Church, bringing hope to the Cherwell Valley. We started this year in January with a prayer meeting, and we looked at these verses in Isaiah 54. Enlarge the place of your tent, stretch the tent curtains wide, do not hold back. Lengthen your cords, strengthen your stakes, for you will spread out to the right and to the left, and your descendants will dispossess nations and settle in their desolate cities. God is speaking to us about growing, about expansion. We believe that God's saying to take this land. The Cherwell Valley is our promised land in which he wants to give to us. And I was really pleased. Rich referenced Isaiah 6 earlier in the meeting. And it says this: in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among the people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King Almighty. And it goes on, and Isaiah says, and send me. He has this revelation of who the Lord is. And I want to say that this vision it comes from God. It's a revelation of what God wants us to do. As we have a revelation of who Jesus is, we want to say, we want to be hope carriers. Hope carriers to go to the Cherwell Valley, to reach this place, to be community, to bring hope, to share life, to be life. That's what God's calling us to do.